All right. Well, I will begin. I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Al Borghese. I'm one of the partners here over at Cerini Associates. I am in charge of our outsourced accounting department, as well as one part of kind of what my department we work on is also efficiency, back office efficiencies surrounding the accounting processes and procedures. And that's implementing AI, working on other kind of solutions to fit in with the accounting processes and procedures. And that's the topic of today's conversation here in this session is driving efficiency with AI and modern back office solutions for nonprofits. I think this is really an area, as I could tell by the amount of participation joining this session, this is an area of extremely hot topic. A few years back, AI seemed to be no one knew exactly what it was going to be, that it had a lot of power, um, how efficient it was going to be. It was a little bit scary too for everyone. One thing now I think that we're seeing with AI, or at least that I'm seeing from my kind of end of things, is you have to kind of embrace it. I don't think it's even an option anymore. We have to learn how to embrace AI, utilize these tools. And the one thing that I always kind of speak to the individuals and clients that I work with, and also just speaking kind of in general about AI, is that we got to learn how to utilize these tools to enhance what the staff are doing, and what our accounting processes and procedures are doing. Basically, enhancing their skill set and not being afraid to embrace this and drive efficiency. From Ken's keynote in the beginning of the nonprofit update here, one thing that he spoke about is some of the contraction, some of the employee pool that is shrinking, as well as also the economic kind of state of nonprofits and how funding sometimes is getting a little bit tougher. We got to figure out ways to kind of innovate, and do things more efficiently to get better information to make actionable decisions. So let me go to the next slide. So once again, I'm Al Borghese. I'm one of the partners here at Cerini Associates. And here's an introduction to some of the current challenges that we're seeing. So challenges in the nonprofit. So one area is there tends to be a lot of manual processes and procedures. Many of your organizations were founded way before technology has enhanced so much over the years. And a lot of times the processes and procedures that have been involved have been very paper driven, paper approvals, as well as kind of the chain, the way that kind of goes up and through. Sometimes the reason for that is also the funding sources, right? Some of the funding sources haven't fully embraced technology. Some of them are still some of them are paper driven. I work with clients that, again, there's some grant funders that still want the paper forms filled out, every receipt attached to those paper forms, which is understandable. But again, technology hasn't been necessarily fully embraced. So I do understand some of those manual processes that need to happen. However, on the back end of things, there's ways and tools that we could utilize internally to help facilitate the collection of a lot of that data that could go to, and that needs to be done from a grant. So instead of having to go now through file cabinets and doing all of that through pulling receipts and having your grant documentation ready to go when you go to vouch to get paid from your various funders, now you could utilize tools such as, Dropbox, such as some of the AP automation tools that I'll talk a little about in a little bit, as well as some of the OCR kind of capturing of documents and so a lot of the virtual tools that are out there to utilize. Some of the other kind of things that we're seeing out there is the AI and automation benefits that I was speaking about before. There's a lot of AI driven tools out there and cloud systems that streamline operations, improve efficiencies, and are enabling strategic focus in nonprofit accounting. So many of the times, kind of going on the first point that I was speaking about here, because there was a lot of manual processes and procedures traditionally through through nonprofit accounting, and getting that information into the system, a lot of times you had to be reactive to information. Basically, you had to get all that data into your accounting systems, run reports to see. Now, between AI and utilizing technology, you're able to get information usually pretty quick because most of the data now is being driven and is being inputted automatically and very efficiently utilizing a lot of these AI and automation tools. And now to close, let's say AP, the AP cycle, AR cycle, your payroll cycle to get good information about what's kind of your driving forces there. You could close down these areas rather quickly. And then when you need to make a decision or a strategic focus on your organization, you don't have to necessarily wait for information anymore. You could pull a trigger in your accounting system, and now you're able to pull up that information and have good data on a accrual basis of accounting to really match things up. So there's a strategic transformation with all of this, right? Because now we're implementing new systems, we're implementing new processes and procedures. So now there has to be a strategic transformation of nonprofits of embracing all of this additional technology. Now, as many of you probably experience within your own organizations, one thing that's really important is leveraging and utilizing, and also the communication with your internal team. Because many of individuals that have been at nonprofits for years, have been with your organizations for many, many years, and are used to that manual process. And it's the embracement of technology that ends up sometimes being difficult. A lot of times you don't get that embracement of technology if there's individuals that have been within your accounting ecosystem for so long. A lot of times it's not until that person leaves through retirement or whatever that you bring in a new body, and that new body is a lot of times more embracing of technology because they're younger, they're newer into kind of their workforces and everything else. So working extremely smarter and not harder is becoming very important. So again, the strategic transformation around a lot of these roles is really important in driving kind of your decisions, and especially compliance as well. Compliance is becoming so tough because I don't know how many of you are all experiencing it, but one thing that I'm starting to see is governmental audits coming in. They're taking a look more at grants, processes, and procedures. How quickly and how good is the information at any given point in time, at looking at things, and how quickly is that information now being turned over to these governmental auditors that are maybe looking at a grant or a specific segment of your business, or even your financial statement auditors at the end of the year. Now you're seeing that even on the audit side of things, when they're doing your financial statement audit, they're also trying to strategically utilize technology to enhance and as well as facilitate the audit process. So by you guys embracing some of these tools internally, it helps that process much quicker and a lot less headache and a lot less more administratively heavy and burdensome on your staff at the end of the year. So what's really important when you're kind of looking at all of this is a roadmap for implementation. How do I do this? What do I look at? And we'll talk a little bit about some of kind of my different points and tips of where, when you're road mapping this all out and starting to try to look at the implementation of AI systems and everything else, there's a lot of popular ones out there: ChatGPT, Cloud. There's Copilot. For many organizations, you're utilizing already the Microsoft 365 suite of things. And when you're working on Microsoft 365, you could utilize Copilot, depending on kind of the level that you have within it. But now you're working in kind of this ecosystem, between using Microsoft Teams, Excel, Word, that integrate very well with one another. So, and that's another point that we'll speak about a little bit more later on in my presentation, is ensuring that you're working with the right AI. There's a lot of different tools, but you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. you really need to make sure strategically that you're looking at this and even working potentially with a outsourced consultant that could work with you in choosing the right ecosystem, because one accounting system may not talk well with one AI system. So that becomes very important. Or sometimes you may need a middle ground where you build a bridge, a technological bridge between your accounting system and maybe one of these other kind of automation tools um, within the accounting process. So here's some of the challenges facing nonprofit offices right now. Complex reporting standards. As funding gets tighter, there tends to be more restrictions. Nonprofit accounting, you guys are facing growing complexity with grant funding rules and regulatory reporting requirements. So this becomes really important to kind of tighten up those systems and make sure that, again, the information is there. Staffing shortages and turnover. I think this is kind of one big area that now that again, a lot of nonprofits, like I was saying earlier, have had staff there that have been there 15, 20. They're towards the end of their career that they're looking at potentially retiring. And because of the shrinking pool that is out there within kind of the accounting and finance industry, it's becoming very difficult for nonprofits to hire good talent to kind of fill those staffing shortages. A lot of that is because it's very difficult competitively for you guys to compete with the salaries and everything else for your counterparts in the for-profit industry that are maybe able to pay a little bit more and a little bit different benefits, because they're not held to the same restrictions and everything else through grants and your specific types of funding that you receive to do this. So again, enhancing and kind of working some of the time that we could do savings through efficiencies and processes become very important. Manual processes and errors. So again, as I was speaking about before earlier, the manual processes and procedures that could be done on a paper tend to be a little bit, someone could lose a check, someone could lose an invoice, right? So having some of those manual processes and manual data entry where someone, let's say an AP clerk, is taking an invoice from a vendor and is manually entering that in. Well, one thing that I'll talk about kind of on this point is many accounting systems, if you have the right upgrade on it. So I know very popular accounting systems that are out there are Sage, FundEZ, QuickBooks. A lot of them now have built-in OCR, which basically is the recognition technology that goes behind in the back scenes of everything to recognize documents and characters on those documents to pull information automatically. So there isn't a data entry issue. So I know FundEZ has an OCR technology in them that's a very popular software amongst nonprofits, that you could scan an invoice in when you're making an AP entry. You could use that technology that brings in that attachment of the invoice, attaches it automatically to your journal entry transaction, and automatically recognizes the characters on that invoice, such as invoice number, date, the amount. A lot of times even line items. These different OCR technologies could utilize and create already an automatic journal entry for you guys. So one thing that's really important is you guys may already have the tools at your disposal through an update over the years, because if you subscribe to any of these different accounting systems, they constantly are generating updates. So what's really important is checking to see, one, before I go out to buy another third-party system, let's say maybe implementing Bill.com. That's optimal character recognition. I just saw a question, what does OCR stand for? So it's optimal character recognition. So one kind of, again, kind of utilizing those tools become important and making sure that you're not duplicating effort. Because one thing that I've seen a lot of is when I will step into a consultatory role, for example, I will see a lot of duplication of what your accounting system already does, but you're utilizing, let's say, Bill.com, and that's a great solution. I utilize it for many clients, or utilizing another kind of AP kind of solution of things, but maybe it's already built in the system that you already have, and you just need to have that open communication with your vendors and different accounting software providers of whether or not that's already included. Also, another kind of area is QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online is another big one that a lot of small nonprofits and even large scale nonprofits are utilizing. One thing that I'm sure that many of you might have grown frustrated over the last couple of years with QuickBooks is that they are migrating from their desktop versions over to cloud-based versions. I know that they still are supporting the enterprise desktop version for now, until they really get their enterprise solution up and running on the cloud. I've seen it before, and it looks promising, but I think for many of you that have utilized it, that may have gotten frustrated over the years with some of the QuickBooks Online stuff. There is still a little bit left to be desired, but it's workable. And there are some powerful tools in there now on the cloud-based version that you could utilize, such as some of this automation process of things, approval chains, putting your budgets in and doing budget to actual reporting it live versus having to do it manually through spreadsheets. And this is kind of this last point that's on this slide, it becomes very important. Demand for real-time insights. So a lot of times, maybe it took weeks to try to pull together information of your latest accounting data that's in the system, make sure that all of your manual processes, such as your AP and everything else, were already recorded. So what might have taken 2 or 3 weeks worth of time to close out a month, depending on the size, maybe it only took a week or two, but now you could close it out a month in a day or two and have that real-time data that is becomes so important and is absolutely key, I think, in driving your nonprofit as well, is being able to make real-time decisions. Real-time decisions are so important and the real-time insights. Where am I with my grants? How much have I spent down? Is there a way that I could can I make that decision now of like, am I fully utilizing a grant? Sometimes you guys are moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour because of everything that's going on within your organizations. Sometimes you don't realize until the end of the year where you're doing your final expenditure reports, oh, wow, I didn't fully draw down on this grant. So that's technically lost money if it's a use it or lose it at the end of the year, or perhaps you have to roll it over into another year. So there's these demands for the real-time insights that become very, very important. Going to my next slide. So efficiency and the role of AI here. Oh, sorry. There we go. Speed and timeliness. So AI, and we talk about this a lot, again, through either Microsoft Copilot or whatever solution that you guys are utilizing. Speed and timeliness. If you're trying to look at, let's say, year-over-year budgeting, or budgeting in the budgeting for next fiscal year, being able to take 3 years, let's say the latest 3 years worth of data, put it into one of these AI models and prompt it. So the most important thing, and I'm not going to go, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go into great detail as far as the proper prompts to put into AI in order to generate what you were looking for. That's a much more detailed discussion of things. But by putting 3 years, let's say, worth of data and feeding it into one of these tools and asking it to create a model for you that projects out, let's say, the next year, 2 years, 3 years. One thing that I'm seeing that's extremely difficult for some nonprofits is going out there, and now as your lines of credit become up for renewal, or as your, let's say, mortgages come up for renewal or refinancing. One thing that I'm seeing that banks are starting to ask for, they're asking for projections. They're asking not only for 1 year projections out, they're asking for 2, 3 years worth of projections, because as many of you nonprofits know, many of your grants and funding tend to be deficit funded. So you're showing shoestring budgets, shoestring marginal profitability in banking terms. And because of that, it's becoming harder and harder to gain lending. So to be able to project out your next 3 years and utilize AI tools to quickly turn that around to a bank, and then also for you guys to utilize those tools to do scenario planning. What happens? So let's say in a school, schools are based off of enrollment, or even many nonprofits that are consumer based off of whatever your mission is, that you're getting paid based off of per consumer that's within your organization. Being able to project that out and take a look at what your variables are very quickly through AI and not having to spend all the time. Before these AI tools came out, it took a decent amount of time to, even with kind of someone like me that has very good Excel knowledge, building that Excel spreadsheet sometimes takes days to build a good model and to make sure it's working. Now you could get a good template through AI. So I'm cutting down on speed and timeliness, and I'm able to leverage my knowledge, or let's say a CFO or a controller internally at your own organization. You're able to utilize now your skills and knowledge of utilizing and translating that information versus having to be someone that manipulates and creates that spreadsheet, that data. So now I got more decision-making time versus having to create time. And I think that is one key takeaway when it comes to utilizing this technology, is we're not looking to necessarily reduce all the time our employee population. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but you want to really utilize these tools to now enhance and utilize the skill set that are your financial professionals. They know how to translate this data. So now I could bring in potentially more skilled individuals that understand and manage certain cycles. Let's say a traditional AP person that was just entering invoices into a system. Maybe now I could leverage them, since they have more free time, to manage the relationships with vendors. That takes a little bit less time off of the CFO and the controller to manage those relationships. Well, now my AP clerk could help manage some of those relationships with my vendors. They can now maybe even help take part of the process of looking at the expenses that I'm paying for. And they could start to notice some trend in increases in cost. Maybe traditionally we've worked with X vendor for so many years and haven't necessarily noticed that slow drip and drab of increases in cost. So now my AP clerk could potentially go out there and do some research for the controller, for whoever's in charge at your organization, to make those financial decisions. And to bring this up and say, hey, I noticed this trend. I really think that I could put through AI and prompt it. Hey, we're buying X supplies for our organization, or Y for our organization. Tell me the top vendors that work in a cost-effective solution here. And you could generate that through AI and come up with those solutions. So these are all ways of utilizing these tools to help research and help analyze data. And going on kind of all of this is the automation is always to reduce errors too, right? If someone's key punching things in, there's so many keys on a keyboard, there's so many numbers on a keyboard, and yes, we all like to think that we're perfect when we enter certain information in, but that manual process of a simple just, oops, I had a fat finger one day and I accidentally hit a 2 versus a 3 on there. That manual data entry, there's room for error. But if I'm utilizing some of this AI technology, utilizing some of these tools that are already built into my accounting system, that reduces that. And now it's just a review of the journal entry to ensure that it's being reported. Now I can focus more on where is it getting properly coded to the right cost center? Is it getting charged properly to the right grant? Those are the areas now I can focus on, rather than the manual key in of this vendor, this number, this line item. That's all automatically done. Now I can focus more time on the things that are important to making sure it's charged to the right places. And it's a lot less cleanup at the end. Real-time financial visibility, we spoke about. And then, like I said, transforming the accounting role. Now, with all this extra time, potentially savings that you have on staff, well, what could they do otherwise? Like I said, you could leverage them to manage some of the vendor relationships, other accounting initiatives that just have not taken place because you've been moving at a million miles an hour. Now I could utilize, like, how do we clean up our AR? When was the last time you cleaned up your AR balances? Sometimes we'll walk into, an organization and there's balances that have been sitting on there for years and years. Are those AR balances collectible? I think that's one really important kind of point to note too, is now you're able to analyze your AR even better through some of these tools and timeliness. If I have 60 or only 90 days, let's say something gets rejected, to now turn it back around to the funder and correct that issue, well, maybe I could run some of those through AI. Hey, AI, could you please um, do an error report on this for all my data correction errors or something that might have been miscoded that I may need to be rebuilt? And you teach it. Now, I think one really important thing to note, and again, I'm going to kind of, we're down to 10:15, so we got about 20 minutes left here. So one thing that's really important that I'm going to talk about is the security surrounding this, right? We're talking a ton of data that we're shoving into these systems and that we're putting in here. And a lot of them are cloud-based. They're no longer hosted on your server that you have to protect. They're out there in the ether. The one really important kind of aspect of this is security. Security of your data. One thing that I think is really important is you need to work with your team in creating a good policy and procedure surrounding the use of AI. Your organization should not be utilizing AI on the open platform. They should be not be utilizing their own personal one and just running it through the let's call it the free versions of all of these, because that opens you to exposure, right? I think for those of yes, the slides will be sent around and shared with everyone. For those of you guys that remember Napster and remember all those other downloading sites that you could download music off of when downloading music was a big thing, when that came out, which I think scared a lot of people, is depending on the restrictions that you had on there, people were able to download tax returns if you didn't have them it's secured in the right place on your own personal computer. So I think that's one thing that for people that have gone through and experienced kind of that aspect of things when Napster was around and everything, and there was this open forum to download cool music and stuff. Now there's AI that you're shoving a lot of potentially personal information, potentially also proprietary information. So making sure one very thing, and the point that I want you all to take here is making sure you're working with a solution that is already been vetted, let's say by your internal or external IT, that you have the right settings on there. What are you utilizing external or are you keeping it internally? Those settings become very important because if we're having it, one thing that I see that Ken's in the chat here, one thing Ken mentioned is understanding Medicaid denials and all of that, but making sure that a lot of those personal information that is tied with necessarily Medicaid billing, you want to make sure that you're staying on a very secure kind of basis and utilizing a secure platform that is only going to be utilized within you guys versus being shared with the automatic AI as far as with the learning that is behind it. So that's another point that I think is extremely important and critical to making sure that your information is safe. I think one thing that's also I'm seeing that I get bombarded with every day. Every day I get a new phone call or email from a new platform that is saying, "Hey, I have this great tool for you that I think that would be utilized with this new up and coming AI." That always makes the hairs on my arm stand up because you're a new one. What is all the security that you have behind your technology? These are questions, and you should come up with a questionnaire when you're researching these different tools of what's the security that's surrounding this. There's a lot of solutions that are out there that have been out there for a while now that are much more trustworthy, have their security and their backup. done already. There's technology out there that will help you close the books. Um, a couple of ones that I'll give you out here. There's like something called DataSnipper that's out there. There's also another technology called DataRails, a solution that will help kind of automate some of your process, do budget to actual, kind of doing all of this, all of these kind of different things. And they've been out there on the market for quite a while, and they do have a robust security behind them, and also certain settings that you can put on so that way your information isn't shared with the collective that are utilizing that particular solution of things. So I'm going to take a quick break here, just to take a look and see what type of questions that we may have. So looks like there's one great question that I do see in here that I will mention. So would you agree moving from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online is more of an application upgrade than a full-blown implementation? That I will say yes to. I feel like it is much more of just an upgrade to a different solution that is within the Intuit ecosystem, because it's one Intuit product to another. I know a lot of you have maybe been hesitant to move your desktop to online. They've made that process relatively seamless. Um, as well as also, if you, like I was saying before, if you guys utilize the enterprise suite that potentially has multiple entities, multiple QuickBooks, we've seen it done in two ways. There's entities that have uh, have multiple other entities surrounding them that they keep in one QuickBooks file, and they utilize the class system. There's also, which is the better way to do it, is if each one of your, let's say, separate segments have a different EIN. Really, technically, they're supposed to have their own kind of separate books. So through the enterprise solution of things, they can now take each one of those individual books, put it on their enterprise suite, and you have full view, and everything's kind of separated out. It also automates your intercompany transactions. So there's a lot that could be done with QuickBooks Online that they are working on. As well. Again, Sage is another big one that a lot of nonprofits are moving to. That's definitely more costly than what QuickBooks Online is. Um, but again, there's a lot of different solutions out there, and I know that this is such a very broad topic, and I'm sure there's tons of questions that you guys have on AI and different solutions that are out there. But again, I think what's really kind of the big takeaway here is the research that goes behind it, making sure that you're implementing the correct system that's appropriate for your organization. Um, Built like for the AP automation, again, Bill.com or utilizing QuickBooks Online solution, both great solutions. Again, if you're not using QuickBooks Online, Bill.com does implement with a lot of these programs. Um, but if it's not, and if you have much more of a robust approval chain, there are other solutions out there such as Stamply. There's Expensify. There's all different types. The other thing that one other one that I will mention here, kind of on this session, is credit cards. How many of you guys still struggle with the credit card process? I don't have a poll that I could do here, but again, the credit card process sometimes is still been very paper driven. And I think utilizing a lot of the tools that potentially your credit card company, if you utilize credit cards, let's say amongst your managers and amongst your individuals that have access to your to a company credit card, utilizing those apps to attach receipts automatically to the transactions become very important. Also, I'll go, I hate to sound like a spokesperson for Bill.com, but it's one that I'm very used to utilizing, and I'm sure many of you guys utilize it too. They have a partnership with a solution called Divvy for credit cards that you could actually utilize to restrict spending to certain specific codes, whether it be every credit card company, they have specific codes for the cost and the vendors that you're purchasing from. And you could restrict the time periods, you could restrict amounts. We've had a lot of success utilizing that for educational institutions that do a lot of field trips, where the teachers have a certain budget that they could go on a field trip and they need it just for that day. And we'll utilize with the client with issuing a virtual credit card that's utilized just for that day, just for the specific zip code that they're traveling to for their field trip. And it's a great tool. And then we also have certain, again, processes and procedures, and documenting what the process procedures are there is we make sure that all those teachers, otherwise they can't do it anymore, is they have to make sure that they upload every single receipt for every single purchase, because how often do those receipts disappear or get lost? So doing it right there just makes the paperwork that much less to have to follow up on. Also, those receipts, I'm not sure how many of you guys have to deal with it, is an order comes in 2 or 3 years later, and because of the way that those thermal print receipts print, you can't even read the receipt anymore, and it becomes problematic. So now having a digital copy that can't get erased or scrubbed and that's automatically cloud saved is a great solution. So we spoke about this. I'll just kind of reiterate. So here's focus on the 3 things that could really be automated. The way that I take a look at this is I always will, let's say, step into a client or suggest that what is your most complicated system that's taking the most time at this point? Is it your allocations of your payroll staff amongst 20 different grants that you have, and each payroll, that person's working a little bit differently here and there? All right, let's step into that process, because that's taking you a full week to get all of your allocations and that get all coded properly into your accounting system. So what we'll do is potentially work with what I suggest is working with your payroll company, getting that all set up where through technology, through time capture or whatever it is, to be set up properly. And now utilizing AI, I could put that journal entry or put whatever additions that I need made, so that way I could have it automatically formatted. And I could create a routine within AI that could automatically format my payroll journal entry, give me that journal entry, let's say in Excel form, and put it right and upload it right into my accounting system. So I just saved what used to take a week to maybe like a day or 2 at most. So look at the different systems internally of what's taking so long. What is the most cumbersome process? And that's usually the process to tackle first. So the next thing that I look at is now we have to think workflows whenever we implement a new system. So what was the approval process before between the journal entries and all of that? Well, digital approval workflow. If you guys are using, let's say, Microsoft Teams, creating a workflow within Teams that you could have these digital sign-offs. A lot of also accounting systems now have this built in, where it's different approval chains that have to be in specific settings that are in there, where a clerk can't necessarily post a journal entry. It has to be approved by the controller or CFO to be posted to the GL. That was, again, a lot of times it was paper-based. I know that when I started out my career, I would go in and there was binders worth of approvals and everything else that we would go through as auditors to look at that approval, look at the original invoice, and it was in a binder labeled, here's my A to C vendors and all of that. And now this is all digitalized online, so it makes the year-end audit process that much easier, instead of having to search out for the original stamped copy of things that were manually signed off on. And let's face it, now that we're working within more of a digital world of things, one thing that becomes really important is, how do I get that digital signature from someone that's maybe working remotely from someone else? So I'm down to my last 5 minutes right here. So I'm just going to go down to here. Financial close, budgeting, and audit readiness. So I've kind of reiterated this point a couple of times now. Streamline financial close process. So now the access to the information is much quicker. The data's in there. I could reduce the stress on my staff on kind of closing out a month. And now, let's say I'm the controller or CFO within an organization. I could pull that information and now I could run, let's say, through AI. Give me an error report of how much, let's say, a line item deviates by a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount. And now I could look at those individual line items pretty quickly. And AI already identifies maybe areas that I want to look at. Or I could put in a month's GL detail and say, please, please spit out any anomalies. Do a forensic audit on this month's GL and label or spit out any information that maybe looks off. And it will do that, AI. It's quite an amazing tool. And it's something, again, a lot of people were very afraid to kind of embrace, but this is something that is becoming more and more powerful that we need to learn to embrace and streamline and look. Budgeting. Budgeting becomes much quicker because now, not only that, I could actually now take 3, 4, 5 years worth of prior year data, put that into a model, not have to build an Excel spreadsheet, put what I want to do this year here. I want to increase my enrollment's going to increase 2 or 3%. My cost here on salaries is going to be, I could automate all that, give it all those prompts of what I wanted to do, and I could come up with a really good budget now that I could focus in with my management team and look at. So there are, again, one thing with any of this technology that we utilize is also recognizing and utilizing the professional skepticism when the information spits out. And utilizing that professional skepticism, making sure that it is accurate becomes very important. So maybe all that data entry and all that additional setup is a little bit time saving. Now I could spend a little bit more time on making sure that the model that I built is accurate. And again, the enhanced audit readiness, I can't tell you how much this automation and everything else and this use of technology has really significantly helped reduce the times on the audit process and readiness at the end of the year. As well as also if a governmental auditor, let's say, decides to come in or a funder decides to come in and do a spot audit, you're usually able to be much more ready for those, spur of the moment kind of audits that potentially pop up here and there. So I have 2 more minutes. I'm just going to quickly go through this slide. So data integration in the hybrid accounting models, again, challenges of fragmented systems. Do your systems right now kind of really talk to each other? Is there duplication? Is your current system, like I was saying earlier, is your current system already capable of doing something that you might have paid extra money for? So as budgets get tighter, those are certain areas that I would highly suggest that you look at. The integrated platform benefits. So utilizing different platforms that potentially could talk to each other and feed information into one another is great. Also, if your system is able to import and implement data, and that also becomes very, very important. Hybrid accounting models. So now as people utilize more AI tools and are able to do things much more remotely, I'm able to now utilize a workforce that maybe is a little bit more spread rather than local. So recruiting good talent isn't necessarily centralized to your location anymore, depending on your operation, of course. And then also creating operational optimization here. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the session. Looks like I hit 10:35 right on the dot. These slides will be shared, and thank you guys so much for joining today's session with me.